Okay, so hello everybody. My name is Lars Lischke. I'm Assistant Professor for Human Computer Interaction here at the FU. And today I have the honor to discuss with you about user evaluation on the web. So in the last weeks you heard a lot about how to implement web technology, how to implement a website. And now I would like to change a bit with you together the perspective and think about actually how do we evaluate what you have built or what you could have built with the real users, that everything is working as expected, what is important from user experience point of view. I will do this in the next 90 minutes roughly. If you have any questions, just raise your arm, let me know, shout in between. If something is unclear, just let me know. I know it's just a session after lunch, so you might be tired, I might be tired, so there might be issues that I don't explain well enough or you don't understood what I would like to explain to you. So just interrupt me, and I would like to have an engaging lesson with you, so I would like to be actively also engage you to get some input from your side. So during this session, I would like you to learn actually to explain the relevance of user studies and user experience, in particular in the context of web technology, web pages, and things like this. Furthermore, you will be afterwards able to distinguish between different types of studies, different types of data you might collect for user experiments. And finally, you will be able to conduct simple A/B testing or user experiments. But let's start and let's assume you own a web shop, or if you're not the business type of man, let's assume you're working for a friend who owns a startup and you should implement the website of the web shop. If you have any idea what might be important for the user of the website, or why you should care about the user in the end. So there's no wrong answer, so simply think about your own experience if you go to a web shop. What makes you feel that this is a good web shop for you? Yes?
Reviews. There are a lot of reviews.
Okay, that there's reviews, so trust plays an important role. Are there any other aspects that might be relevant?
It should be easy to use, even for someone who isn't, let's say, as technologically advanced as we are.
Yeah.
You know, think from the very simple perspective of the user. Don't make a button and then show more buttons, for example.
Okay, so it should be easy to navigate, easy to find what you're looking for. And from a business perspective, why should you care about these things?
It'll make it more likely that you'll sell something.
Okay, yeah, simply because if users cannot buy stuff, you will not make any profit. So think about competition is very close. That's different to having a real world store. Simply going to another web page costs the user nothing. Mostly prices are really similar to other web stores. And the user experience, user interface is in many cases the discriminating factor between different web shops. And also, as we heard, comparing between different web shops is not an issue for users. So users can easily compare Prices are mostly similar, so the distinguishing factor is how you actually present yourself on the web page. So there's a direct correlation in many cases reported between the usability and how successful the web shop is, how much you sell. If the user cannot find a product, the user will not buy it. That's simple. Also, if the user is not able to fill the required forms, then the user will not buy the product. But also when you think about other business models, like having an online service, in many cases it's interesting for you actually to keep the user engaged. So we have to think about what is engaging for the users. How do we keep the user active on our service? And there are a couple of techniques, but we have to monitor and we have to achieve improvements all over the process. But also when we don't run our own business or we don't work for a business, for example, for government, it's quite important to ensure that everybody can find the information he or she is looking for. Simply because there's the relevance for society to provide access to certain information, to have public discussions, to provide access to public services. And also finally, we as researchers, we would like to understand the world. We would like to understand how users behave using web technology. So purely from an academic point of view, we would like to know how people react to certain stimuli, how people react to certain types of websites, how they interact with them to improve the interaction as such. This leads to the term then usability, and usability is simply the quality of a product or a service, how easy it is to use, and it's also referred during the design process to achieve an easy-to-use product. And when we look on Nielsen defines 5 components of usability. So there's the component of learnability, so how easy can I interact with an interface when I see it the first time as a user? How much time do I need to understand actually all the components I might have to use? Then there's the second one, efficiency. So how efficient can I interact with the user interface as soon as I've learned to interact with it? So I have a certain task I would like to achieve. How easy is it for me to actually achieve my goal by using this user interface? Then memorability. So how easy is it to me when I return after a while for a second time or a couple of times to do the same task again? So how easy can I remember what to do? And then, as we all humans make errors, we should think about how we handle errors, how we prevent errors, but also, as soon as we did an error, how can the user recover from this error? And finally, the user satisfaction. So how pleasant is it to use a certain user interface? And here, actually, I would like to give you 5 minutes to discuss with your neighbor, what would this actually mean for you if you would have a web shop? Or think about examples. You can also look it up on a website, openbowl.com or Amazon, and think about actually what kind of aspects are relevant if you look on these 5 key components. And then we can discuss what this actually means for you in terms of a website, a web shop. So we will continue in 5 minutes, and please discuss it here with your neighbor. Okay, so let's go once through the list and let's think about what elements, how do we implement these concepts when we have a web shop, when we have a website where we would like to sell products. So do you have an idea what might be relevant to achieve a high learnability of the interface for your customers? Think about your own experience, what makes you, if you don't have to be a web shop necessarily, if you use a new computer interface, what makes it easy for you to understand it when you see it the first time? Yeah?
The menu, so it's easy to navigate to the stuff that you need.
So menu with a clear structure that helps you. That's a good point. Is there another point? What is in the menu, for example? Think about what do you have in your menu. So simply, it's, for example, important to speak the language of the user. Help the user with metaphors the user might know from real life. So if you think about a web shop, every web shop has a basket where you put all your products in, even though there's no real basket somebody's carrying around for you. But the metaphor is so well known that it's quite easy to understand the concept there. Any idea for efficiency? What can we do to improve the efficiency so when a user knows how to interact with the interface, to improve the efficiency, how efficient the process can be? Yeah?
Categories in search bar?
Yeah, category and search bar is a very classical thing. So provide multiple ways to achieve the same goal. So you could have a menu that the user can navigate through different categories to find the product, or I can have a search bar when the user knows what to search for. And if you look, for example, on professional systems, we see also that you have shortcuts, for example, which are hardly to learn, but as soon as you have learned them, you're much more efficient than typing everything manually, as somebody who sees the interface the first time would do it. Any idea what we could do to increase the users memorizing the approaches to use? I think this is a bit, in particular for web applications, a tricky one. Simply, it's a combination of what we discussed so far. Provide clear instructions, provide help when needed, and have clear state in which the system is, so simply indicate what the user should do next. So try to avoid that the user has to know, instead of the system provides you with information what next to do. Any ideas about how to prevent errors? Or what kind of errors might occur, in particular, if we have a web shop? Yeah?
The basket doesn't say what you've already added.
So for example, you might have more or to less products added to a basket. Just something else? Yeah?
Discount codes that do not work.
Discount code, so you have to enter special fields that might not work, or you might have mistyped. And we figured out certain design patterns to solve actually these issues. In particular, also when you think about you're buying a real product on the internet, in the end somebody has to ship it to you. So you need to enter your address. So think about how we design the form where you enter all the data and then try to automatically check if everything is correct before the user proceeds. And also give the user the possibility to review what the user has entered. And so, for example, what Amazon is doing now, after you got the overview of what you have ordered and to which address you would like to have it shipped, they say, oh, if you now identified that you did something wrong, please send us immediately an email. Simply because adding another step helps them and the customer to not do something wrong. So show all the needed information again to the user and provide the possibility to recover from these errors. And then satisfaction. Do you have any idea about how we achieve a higher satisfaction of the user? This is also a bit more complicated simply because there's a lot of personal taste to it. There are design choices, how we actually perceive that something is well designed, that the interaction process is smooth, but there's not a clear do it in this way or that way. But we will discuss this later, how we can actually then test things. And now we start discussing about how to evaluate. So simply now we have a basic understanding what we would actually like to achieve, what we would like to improve. But actually now the question is, how do we know that we improved something in the right direction? And what we do to know this, we formulate a research question, and then we conduct studies or experiments that help us to answer our research question. So what is a research question? A research question is also from time to time called a problem statement. So we have, let's say we have 2 designs of our website, and now we are saying, okay, we would like to know which one is better. Or we say, we are interested to know where our users are coming from. Do they come over Google, or do they come from another search engine? Do they type the URL directly? And because it's called a research question, normally it ends with a question mark because it's a question. And sometimes, or I would say more often, we do not have only one question, we might have multiple questions, and they should have a relevance either for theory or practice. And then we can distinguish between 3 different types of studies, and then this depends on also what kind of study methodology we apply later on. So we have explorative studies, so we would like to know what is related, and here's example questions. We have what factor then determines if people come back to visit the website a second time. This could be then a research question for an explorative study. Or is there a correlation between characteristics of my visitors and the type of errors they make? So here we have more broad research question. We don't have an idea what it could be. So it's pretty open what the result could be. Then we have descriptive studies. So simply we could be interested in the percentage of visitors coming from Google, or in the percentage of people typing our URL directly. And this might actually then, in terms of websites, change how we advert our web page, or how do we communicate to our users. And then we have explanatory studies. So we would like to know, does the additional login function, for example, mean that people come back a second time or not? Does our new link structure or navigation structure on the web page allows people to find relevant information quicker? And to answer these questions, what we do as researchers, either in academic researchers or also in industry, we collect data. And there are different types of data. Either we collect qualitative data. This might be, we conduct interviews and we get a lot of words, or we might describe a certain process. We might take pictures of real world things or web pages, screenshots. We could also collect objects, but this is actually for web technology, I think, not really a thing. Or we could have quantitative data, simply all data in a numerical form. So how long does it take a user to perform a certain action? How many users do I have? All kinds of percentages we could have. And then we have different types of methods to actually collect data, depending on our research question, depending on the state in which we are at the moment with our development or business project. So we could, for example, observe our users, how they do certain processes. We could conduct focus groups. Focus groups are kind of group interviews around a certain topic, pretty open, used in the early stage of a design process simply to understand what is the user aiming for, what is the approach of the user, how can we help the user by providing the right technology. But also we can conduct classical interviews, either pretty open, so simply also to get an understanding of the user, or we can have a clear protocol where we ask questions in a more structured way. And we can conduct surveys. This allows us to reach out to more people, but we get only answers to the questions we ask them. There's not a possibility to ask back because simply it's all remote and not at the same time. And then we can either conduct experiments in our laboratories or we can conduct experiments in our field. And so depending on the type of methodology we use, we can collect different type of data, which allows us then to answer different kind of research questions. In the following, I would like to focus first on experiments, on experimental studies, simply because this is the most important technique actually to perform A/B testing if you have, for example, two different designs for your website. So what is actually an experiment? An experiment is a procedure carried out to support, refute, or validate a hypothesis. And the hypothesis is an assumption about the correlation between two different variables. So for example, if something is happening, then something else is happening, or if X is larger, then Y is smaller. Or in terms of web technology, this could be that we say website layout A enables users to find information, relevant information, faster or better than layout B. And the two variables can be either any kind of human capability, a kind of technology, behavior, whatever you might imagine. But important for a hypothesis is that we can actually prove it, and therefore we need to be able to measure the outcome, the relevant change. And this is actually, so finding a variable which is operationable is quite a complicated task. So it might be that on the first glimpse it looks quite straightforward and easy, but when you think about different kind of hypotheses, actually this might get more complicated. So going back to our example of the hypothesis with the two layouts, and saying our hypothesis is that finding with layout A relevant information better, then the question is actually what do we mean by better? And this could be simply the time needed to find the relevant information, but you could have also another definition of this. We could also ask something improves the usability of the interface, but then it's the question, how do we measure actually usability? And here a straightforward approach would be to say, okay, we use a standardized usability questionnaire, and then for the new interface, we get a higher rating. And then I have two more hypotheses, and again, it's now your task to discuss with your neighbor how you would operationalize these hypotheses that we actually can measure something in our experiment. Therefore, you have, again, 5 minutes time. Okay. So, how would you measure that an input form improves the user performance? So again, think about our example with the web shop. The customer has to enter the shipping address. How would you test if the new interface is more performant to use for the user than the old one? What would you measure? Yes? How much time it takes to enter all the data? That's a good point. Another idea? So the other possibility would be, for example, to measure how many errors the user did, or how many corrections they need to do. And as you see now here, there's often not a clear right or wrong. What you could do is simply, there's different options, there are different opinions, so you have to clearly state what is relevant for your research. Then what is about next hypothesis that our interface increase the awareness of other available products in our web shop? Yes?
Well, you can measure the sales of that product before you added it to like other users bought this product with this or whatever.
Yeah, so you could, for example, say, okay, we release the new interface and then we measure how often a certain product was sold before and afterwards. Could either say sold, or you can say, okay, we have a look on how often a specific product was actually viewed. And thinking about the measurements, this is a really important point about the validity of our research. So we have to carefully define what we would like to measure, and think about, do we actually measure the right things? So for example, we would measure the length of the screw. Then we could try to use a thermometer, but that's probably not the right approach to do this. Also, we could say, oh, we are interested in the intelligence of our users, but then measuring the head is probably also not a good idea. So we have to carefully think about how do we actually define our measurements and how we then going to measure this. And as we all now realize, this is not a trivial task. There are different approaches how to do this. Either you can look in the related literature. This might help in the sense that there might be already consensus in the research community how to measure certain things. Then the results are comparable between different studies. That's actually nice. But on the other hand, if you do something new, there might not be an established concept. What you then can do is simply define your measurement for your experiment. So simply explaining in your experiment design, in the reporting later on, we define something as such, and this is how we measure it. Then it's harder actually to compare it to other studies, but if you don't have the chance actually to have a comparable measurement, that's better than nothing. And also, it has a bit of the vagueness that actually others might be not convinced by your argumentation that you're using the right measurements. Looking on this from a human-computer interaction perspective, there's a consensus, for example, when we talk about efficiency, that we then mostly talk about task completion time. So how long does it take a user to solve a certain task? And for accuracy, we talk about how many errors are there, or the error rate. And then there are standardized questionnaires, and they help you, for example, accessing the task load or the intuitivity of a user interface, or how usable an interface as such is. And again, if you use standardized questionnaires, you're a bit limited in the question you are asking, but on the other hand, you get comparable results showing not only how your product is, but can be also then compared to other studies not conducted by you. And now we have the first half of our lecture over, and I would like to discuss with you in terms of variables, in terms of an experiment after the break at 2:30. Thank you.